Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive, staggering paradox. How does a nation spend trillions on electricity, yet its citizens are still left completely in the dark? We're talking immense resources, grand political promises, and a grid that, well, just refuses to stay on. Let's jump right in with the question you've probably asked 1,000 times. You know the drill, right? The sudden darkness, that collective sigh, and then, almost instantly, the hum of generators roaring to life everywhere. People literally relying on their own petrol just to power a fan or keep a business running. But seriously, why does the national grid in Africa's largest economy just keep collapsing? Take a look at this number, 11 trillion naira. According to a massive investigation by SERAP, that is the estimated amount of public funds, private equity, and social investment completely lost to corruption in the power sector since 1999. It's an absolutely mind-boggling sum that has just vanished, leaving everyday citizens footing the bill for massive political failure. So, here's our roadmap for This Explainer. We're going to break this puzzle down into 5 parts: the endless power crisis, billions spent with zero results, the privatization failure, corruption and political interference, and finally, charting the way forward. Starting with part 1, the endless power crisis, we need to look at the actual technical reasons behind these constant daily blackouts. The technical instability here is honestly severe. This data from NERC shows just how sensitive the grid really is. See, the national grid has to operate within extremely specific boundaries for voltage and frequency. When demand suddenly exceeds supply or there's a disruption, these metrics wildly deviate. To prevent total equipment destruction, safety settings automatically trigger a shutdown. One shutdown cascades into another, and boom, the entire system collapses. And here is the crucial point. Unlike countries with stable power, Nigeria basically lacks a sufficient spinning reserve. Think of this as a backup tank, meant to absorb sudden shocks. Because the grid is stretched unbelievably thin, trying to power over 200 million people, a single fault on a transmission line can plunge the entire country into darkness. And this isn't some rare anomaly. It's happened over 105 times in just 10 years. Every single collapse costs the economy millions of dollars just to reboot. But here's why this really matters on a personal level. Despite the whole sector being privatized, citizens are essentially paying a heavy shadow tax. Entire communities are forced to crowdfund just to buy their own transformers and poles. People are paying up to 150,000 naira for a single-phase prepaid meter. And the kicker? Once you actually buy that transformer with your own hard-earned money, it technically becomes the property of the distribution company? Wild, right? Okay, moving to part 2. Let's look at the immense financial inputs and the totally baffling lack of output. Literally, how do you spend billions of dollars and get zero results? This breakdown perfectly captures that zero results reality. On paper, there's an installed capacity of over 10,000 megawatts. Sounds decent, right? But the actual available capacity sits at around 6,000. And ultimately, the decrepit transmission system only manages to safely wheel about 4,000 megawatts to consumers. To put that into perspective, countries with a fraction of the population routinely distribute tens of thousands of megawatts. We literally have the plants, but we just can't get the power to the people. And of course, the political clash over where the money went is fierce. You have former President Buhari publicly alleging that a staggering $16 billion was completely wasted on power projects by a previous administration with absolutely no results. Then you have former President Obasanjo firing back, daring Buhari to probe me, citing old EFCC clearances and his own published financial records. But honestly, regardless of the political finger-pointing, the everyday citizen is the one sitting in the dark, wondering where those billions vanished to. This whole funding crisis is compounded by extreme structural vulnerabilities. The grid relies heavily on natural gas. It makes up about 75 to 80% of the energy mix, with hydro covering the rest. That heavy reliance makes the system incredibly fragile. If the generation companies, or GenCos, can't pay their gas suppliers, the gas stops flowing and the plants literally cannot run. Which brings us to another massive, honestly terrifying figure. GenCos are drowning in a reported 6.8 trillion naira of debt. Because the distribution companies at the bottom of the chain aren't collecting enough revenue to pay back up the chain, the GenCos are completely out of cash. They can't maintain aging machines, and they can't buy the gas needed to generate power. Just recently, 16 out of 33 power plants were completely shut down because of this exact liquidity crisis. This massive debt and total operational paralysis leads us straight into part 3, the highly criticized 2013 privatization exercise. The promise was that private ownership would finally bring efficiency and capital. But, as we know, the reality has been very different. According to this report by the Energy for Growth Hub, the unbundling of the power sector was fundamentally flawed from day one. It was built on incredibly overly optimistic models. The government assumed tariffs would cover costs, transmission infrastructure would somehow be stable, and government agencies would actually pay their electricity bills. Because of these flawed assumptions, the more realistic, conservative bidders were basically penalized during the auction, so the assets ended up in the hands of overly optimistic buyers. And the fallout is stark. The Nigerian Senate actually went ahead and declared the 2013 privatization exercise a total failure. The numbers absolutely back them up. Operational generation capacity dropped by 33% post-privatization. Right now, only about 23% of electricity production costs are ever even recovered. Plus, the investors who bought these assets borrowed heavily. $780 million in bank loans from that initial purchase are still unpaid today. The harsh truth? Many of the new owners just lacked the technical expertise and the deep pockets needed to fix a dilapidated grid. To put that specific failure into perspective, just look at how some of these legacy power plants are doing right now. Based on NBET data, the Sapele plant operates at an abysmal 4.5% of its contracted capacity. The AFAM 435 plant, just 8.6%. When private companies take over and operate at less than 10% capacity, it is glaringly obvious that the system is broken. Let's move to part 4. The systemic corruption and political interference reported to have crippled this sector from the inside. This isn't just about bad business models. It is a story of how politicians have fundamentally failed the citizens they swore to serve. The SIRAP investigation really lays bare how the sector is undermined at every single level. At the top, you've got muddled probes into massive scandals at the Rural Electrification Agency. You have politicians treating electricity contracts like political constituency projects that never actually deliver any power to the people. Down at the consumer level, there's blatant estimated billing fraud, distribution companies just charging arbitrary amounts without meters, while citizens engage in meter bypass and electricity theft. Add in the politicization of NARC regulatory appointments, and it's basically a masterclass in systemic rot. You can see this painfully sluggish political follow-through perfectly in the high-profile Siemens power deal. Conceived back in 2018, it promised a roadmap to hit 25,000 megawatts by 2025. Instead, literally every single milestone was missed. The project lay completely dormant for years. It became just another classic empty promise, dusted off and recycled during election campaigns to win votes, with absolutely nothing getting done in the meantime. It's a vicious cycle. Billions are committed, grand speeches are made, and then execution just vanishes until the next election rolls around. But it isn't all just doom and gloom. Let's look at part 5, exactly what energy experts and anti-corruption watchdogs are saying must be done to chart a sustainable way forward and actually keep the lights on. The recommended structural steps are clear and they are actionable. First, decentralized power. The new Electricity Act allows state governments to regulate their own energy, breaking up the monopoly of that fragile national grid. Second, enforce mandatory independent financial audits for every electricity company so we actually know where the money is going. Third, the federal government needs to fully divest its remaining stakes. Public funds shouldn't be used to bail out failing private entities. And finally, roll out transparent procurement and mass metering programs. Now, there is a glimmer of hope on that mass metering point with the DISRP initiative. This is a $500 million World Bank-funded program actively working to distribute 3.2 million smart meters across the country. The goal here is pretty straightforward. Close the metering gap and finally kill the fraud of estimated billing. That ensures consumers only pay for what they use, which then actually provides reliable revenue back up to the gencos. So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to consider. With state governments newly empowered by decentralized laws and World Bank loans rolling out millions of meters, is this the actual way forward to finally break this dark cycle? Or, knowing the history of political interference we've just discussed, are we just funding yet another multi-trillion naira empty promise destined for the next election cycle? Let me know what you think. Thanks for joining me on this explainer and keep questioning the data.